Welcome to Executive Insights. My guest today is Paul Lewis, Global CTO and Board Advisor. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, Paul accumulated millions of air miles by traveling across the world and working with CIOs from a variety of industries to help them with their digital transformation plans. In this episode, Paul shares the insights he learned from his travels and his conversations with hundreds of CIOs in the past few months. We explore key considerations for IT leadership as we continue to journey through these challenging times. And Paul reflects on what being resilient means to him. Hi, Paul. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi there. How are you doing?
Good. Paul, you traveled across the world pre-COVID and spoke with hundreds of CIOs virtually in the past few months alone from a variety of industries and geographies. What are your key learnings?
It's truly clear that across geographies and across industries that 2021, 2022, and 2023 will look a lot more like today than 2019. The reality is working from anywhere and agile IT is in fact the new normal. What's great is that what may have taken 3 to 5 years took 3 to 5 quarters, and that we have full and complete innovation in IT in a much faster, more dramatic fashion than we ever anticipated.
You have a deep understanding of the complexity of operating IT and the impact of technology on business. It's fair to say that the pandemic has really dialed up the digital transformation efforts for many organizations and put IT in the driver's seat. What do you consider as the big bets for the IT leadership as we continue to journey through these uncertain times?
It's fair to say that digital transformation is affecting different industries in different ways. In fact, I kind of think it was 3 different buckets of changes. The first one would be the thrivers. Think of this as the media streaming companies and the telcos. They're worried about scale. That's the IT consideration. What happens when I triple the amount of transactions or quadruple the amount of users? What is the performance and security affecting that kind of workload? On the other side of the spectrum are more the challenged. These are theme parks and movie theaters and airlines. Think of them as having zero or near zero revenue. So the IT consideration is, how do I spend IT money differently, especially since those IT budgets are going down? In the middle, the bigger bucket is the changers. These are organizations, most organizations that have some physical presence in their customer experience. They have to create a new mobile app or a new e-commerce site or changing their supply chain. I've got to look at digital transformation as creating new customer experiences for different or existing customer segments that simply want to buy differently from you. I also think there's a leadership change. I think leaders that manage by walking around simply can't do that in a federated environment. You know, I have thousands of people at home and I can't just knock on the door anymore. I've got to have a virtual presence, and I still have to do one-on-ones. And therefore, that's changing the way I lead and changing the way who I promote into leadership.
I like how you frame that in 3 different categories, and the key considerations are different in those 3 categories, but you also mentioned the key considerations for leadership, which is very valuable.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to zoom in on the technology and the role the technology plays. Based on your global CIO insights, what technologies have become or are becoming essential in CIOs' digital transformation plans, and why?
So of the hundreds of conversations I've had with CIOs, and of course operating IT myself, there's really 3 different dimensions of technology change and innovation. The first one is scale. How do I deal with the waves of change that are coming at me? And it's pandemic change and employment change and economic change. I've got to deal with ramping up and ramping down resources. So in this, I think about cloud computing, shifting my applications into the cloud. I think of scale out type of data center architectures. And of course, I think of hyper converged type technologies where I can add node by node depending on the transactions that are coming at me. The second one is agility. How do I deliver projects from 9 months to 3 weeks? In that, I've got to think about how to buy those resources differently. How do I allocate people differently, much faster than I have before? Then I have to think about automation, those 17 steps in my run book. How do I make it 2? How do I shift those administrative resources to ITSM resources who worried about tens of thousands of endpoints? And then finally, resilience. Not only resilience of my infrastructure, but also resilience in my data. Data is more important than applications and infrastructure. And now that it gets created at the edge and in the data center and in the cloud, in my customers, in my supply chain, how do I make sure that it's protected, that it's secured, that it manages its life cycle, that it's kept private, that I can ensure that I can create value from it wherever it happens to be created and wherever it happens to be used. So it's resilience, it's agility, and it's scale. These are the big IT considerations right now.
Excellent. And those are very fundamental building blocks for a CIO's digital transformation plan.
Mhm.
The crisis so far has taught us so many lessons. And beside the vital role that technology plays, it also helps us appreciate so much more the essential qualities in people, in our leadership, and in brands. And in some ways, the crisis has humanized us. I'm often moved by the stories of empathy and courage and resilience. I think the human capacity of overcoming and becoming is so extraordinary. I remember Sheryl Sandberg, a COO of Facebook, said that resilience is a muscle. The more you work it, the stronger it gets. What does resilience mean to you?
It's interesting. This pandemic has created federated organizations. Like there are some 100 and 150-year organizations with single cultures where you go into the office, you wear a suit and tie, think banks, think telcos, but it's not like that anymore. It's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of federated employees. We, the organizations are being invited into individual people's homes. Individuals are determining how they want to work, when they want to work, who they want to work with, and it's shifting a pretty significant increase in the gig economy. That's a pretty significant difference between just simple productivity. I've got to work with my teams in terms of simple health and safety. Are they getting the right medical treatment? Or do they have access to groceries? Or things like economic and employment. Are they going to have jobs going forward? What's the economic implications of their RSPs going forward? And then, of course, collaboration and communication. Now that we can't have one-on-one in-person conversations and we have this technology between us, how can we still create personal interactions? How can I show a sense of empathy towards what's happening with them and with us and with the organization as a whole? But to me, when I'm looking at my individual resilience, I'm thinking about lots of different things. I'm first thinking about maintaining a consistent schedule. I have to ensure that I still want to wake up at the same time and still grab my coffee and still consume content, still go to meetings, take the dogs for a walk and finally end at the same time so we can have dinner with the family as we usually do. You still want to consume the type of content and engage in the same way. If you're used to having one-on-one conversations with your employees on a weekly basis, you have to continue to do that. Engage externally in the same way. If you're still doing roundtables and meeting one-on-ones with customers and stakeholders, you still want to do that in the same way. But most importantly, it's about compassion. And it's not just compassion for you and your family, or compassion for your employees and your customers, but it's compassion for everybody you interact with. It might be the waiters, it might be the Uber drivers, it might be the delivery personnel, it might be the grocery cashiers. Ultimate compassion, because everybody is feeling the same way. Everybody's impacted by the pandemic. And these are the ways to stay resilient over the long term.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I think resilience means that despite the challenges and adversities, we still find ways to be creative and to be agile and, to have the drive to still move forward.
Mhm.
You've been at the forefront of technology leadership and advocacy for over 2 decades, and you've accumulated a wealth of perspectives and knowledge. What's the next big thing for you?
I'm glad you asked. Uh, Remember, we've got to think about how this world's changing in many different ways, both from a technological perspective and from a leadership perspective, and just how we operate, interact with people. What I really like is this new dimension of digital transformation where it's a better environment. It's a faster environment. It's a more mobile environment. It's a highly interactive environment. And we have to enable that with technologies. And I want to be able to do that. Remember, the complexities here isn't the size of the bubble. It's not about the mobile app. It's about how the mobile app interacts. So I like to spend a lot of my personal time and creativity trying to find those links and connections. Links between what's happening in politics to what's happening in technology, links to what's happening in the animal world to how we behave as leaders. And we want to create and look at the talent that's happening in this world and fulfill on those roles. If you look at data science as a great example, there are thousands of open data science roles, but only 2,000 graduates. I want to spend a good portion of my time in the talent creation side. How do we make sure we have up and come talent from academia and from other parts of the IT organization to put them into those newfound interesting technology roles? Things like an AI technology role, or a data science technology role, or a CI/CD cloud computing application development type role. This is where I want to spend a good portion of my personal time.
That sounds like a very exciting and inspiring journey ahead. And thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate this insightful conversation. You've been watching another episode of Executive Insights by the IT Media Group. Thank you for tuning in. If you like this video today, be sure to check out our other CIO-centric content on our YouTube channel. And don't forget to subscribe